And we are recording. So, leaves me nothing further ado than to hand over to Lars, the Chief Learning Officer from Totura. Over to you, Lars. What are you going to tell us about today? Oh, let's put that back on the first slide about learning with impact.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for everyone for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. It seems like it's predominantly wet and windy, a bit snowy, and lucky few with a bit of sun. So thank you for that. It's great to have such a sort of global audience. Totra is very much a global organization. We've got a very strong heritage out in the Asia Pacific region in New Zealand, Australia, in the US now particularly, and here in the UK and across Europe. So and it's really great to have an interested audience in learning with impact. And as Andrew was saying, I think, and I'm hoping that many of you on this session are realizing that as we move into what I think is a very exciting new era for us as learning professionals supporting our organizations, whatever size and shape they are, that we can really work to transform how learning supports our businesses and how we can really improve performance and develop people more effectively. And the reason for this is we're just grappling with enormous amounts of change, aren't we? I mean, it feels like it's getting faster every week, every day, even every morning and afternoon, it seems, particularly if you look at the news agenda and just look at the sort of economic, social impact of this change, largely predicated by technology, but there's an awful lot of societal shifts that we need to handle. And on that note, I mean, I'd like to ask an immediate question really about how are you all coping with this change, and what is it that's really impacting you right now, and challenging, I guess, the status quo that perhaps you've been used to operating within over the previous years. Anything you'd like to share?
Thank you, Lars. So, in that box that's just opened up underneath, what changes are impacting your team right now? What are the things that are having an impact on the work that you do? I work with lots of organizations. I have lots of people telling me what's wrong with the world all the time. So I know that there will be people who will have particular comments here. And let's have a look. So Lauren, reduction in budgets are an issue, financial pressure as well, says Emily. Nice to see. And the obvious one, leveraging AI. Emily talks about AI and Ben says AI as well. Interesting to see Andrew in the other chats, but trying to manage L&D remotely. And I think that's a challenge across the piece, Andrew. I think you're right. Victoria says a lack of time and resource for team and our learners. And Jennifer, pensions, regulatory changes, having to implement new rules following legal judgments. Yeah. And there's also the whole funding piece around pensions as well. We could get into an entirely different conversation around that one. Linda's talking about new areas of business. So is that new business and new sectors, Linda? Be interesting to hear what that is. Julie's talking about a lack of resources to deliver face-to-face. Is that just people, Julie, or is it more than that? Is it space and rooms as well and so on? Culture, appetite of learning to support on-demand model. Culture is an interesting one, Steph. We see that a lot in terms of culture. There's a societal culture and so on. Lars, what are your thoughts looking at some of the comments that are coming through?
It's a good range. I guess I could have bet a few pints of beer that we'd be talking about AI and pressures around budget and how we spend money on our people. And I guess the perception of how the learning team and how HR as a function as a whole is regarded in an organization as a strategic support for an organization to be competitive, effective, and efficient in what its activities are. The whole post-pandemic shift, I suppose, to remote working, more flexible working, and now maybe the pendulum shift in some organizations, at least, about bringing people back into the office and having more face-to-face contact. I think all of these are challenges, common challenges. They were there before. They've been there for a long time, arguably. I mean, even the impact of automation and AI in the more general terms, and I'll come on to that let's come on to that now, particularly in terms of technology and its impact. So please do keep
Excellent.
adding your thoughts into the chat as we go through. So
They'll
very
have to
happy.
put them in the other chat, because I'm going to close that window down now. So it's interesting to keep the
Oh,
comments.
right,
And
good.
remember, everybody in the recording, you can go back, look at the recording, you can look at the chat that's in there as well. And yeah, Holly's added culture for learning, and Linda as well, pivoting
Yeah,
business. That pivoting, I think, is a really important one. So we'll come to that AI piece now, I think, Lars.
absolutely. And I mean, I think a lot of you will have been very mindful of the impact of AI. It really exploded onto the mainstream stage at the beginning of last year, if not slightly sooner than that. But from my perspective, having studied AI back in the late 80s, when a lot of the sort of original sort of thinking around how you can develop um, assistive technologies was rooted. We just lacked the computing power and the storage reach back then. It's really had a huge impact. And bringing it main stage, means that we all have to learn how to use this sort of new types of technology effectively. But I think we can already see that there's benefits to be had, and early research. And I'm picking on one example, which was a well structured piece of research. There's plenty of sort of anecdotal evidence, but you know, using one particular form of AI, generative AI systems, they can really help improve productivity for folk who have access to them, particularly in office roles. It raises also the performance of perhaps lower performing employees, so those who are maybe struggling a bit and need development and support. So you can really see a shift in the trajectories of overall performance in an organization by deploying those types of systems effectively. But interestingly, from a learning perspective, if we were to apply this type of technology to, say, onboarding new staff and onboarding, building new skills capability into existing staff as needs shift, then we can shorten that that curve or that time to gain valuable, useful, applicable experience and shorten that down. So in this example, were able to demonstrate a reduction from 6 to just 2 months, which is a game changer really when you apply that across a business at scale. The other aspect of this is that if you have high performing workers, we always have a range of people who can really harness technology early on. If they have valuable knowledge, that can be amplified right across the business, so more people can take advantage of that. So that old adage of knowledge equals power, still sort of true, and access to sort of real solid knowledge and capabilities is still very important, but you can unlock that from individuals and really actively spread that right across a business, which can be transformational. Um, Really, the point of my talk here is not to dwell too much on the AI tools and things, which are very exciting and in previous discussions with Andrew, shiny and new, and it captures a lot of our sort of immediate attention. But we need to be careful, I think, in addressing the real elephant in the room, and that is, what is the impact of our learning and development activity? What impact is it having on our businesses and the people that we're looking to support and develop? And this, the sad fact, having been beavering away in this industry for a good many decades, there's been a huge amount of change in terms of technology, much less so in terms of our approach to the learning experience that people have. So it's mediated through technology more and more, but actually the sort of the learning effectiveness has been more neglected really, because we've defaulted to very sort of traditional approaches which perhaps aren't as effective as we would like them to think they are. It really shows that there's a disconnect between the money that we allocate and support. We know we need to support people. We know we need to develop people, not least for regulatory and compliance reasons where we have to. But beyond that, there's still a disconnect between us knowing that that's having a meaningful impact in many cases. So anecdotally, and many different reports report different types of percentage figures, but around 70% of L&D spending could be regarded by your leadership as is sort of wasted. It's a bit like the advertising industry of old, where you didn't quite know which half of your ad spend was effective. That's no longer true. Ad spend and marketing has really sort of, through tight metrics and been able to track what does work and what doesn't work, We're in that age now where learning really needs to adopt a similar principle, or will do, whether we like it or not. And those who do will be able to direct their investment much more strategically and in a focused manner. So we want to move, I think, to a model which does accommodate accelerating change and challenge. Now, that rate of change means we have to constantly upskill, shift our focus as to what the business needs to be succeeding in, and that means our role as learning professionals is really crucial in a strategic support if we get ourselves into the right place and can provide the evidence for it. It means we need to move away from traditional thinking, perhaps the old sheep dip approach of, right, let's produce a whole load of training programs and let's put them and make them available via any platform, learning management system or others, and people will come and complete them, and then they will be changed. And performance will improve. It doesn't really work like that. I think all of us who are close to learning know that that doesn't really work, but we need to change the environment and culture to the point of one of the people on this session has already said about the culture of learning to being a culture of performance that is supported by learning right in the flow of all of their work that they do. So it's a natural part of your everyday work. Now, this is supported by this sort of shift is now more and more widely recognized. It's not just me saying this. Interesting trends being reported by the CIPD just middle of late last year. And some of it sort of contradicts some of the chat that we just had. But in a broader sense, there is a rise in headcount in L&D and budget up, but it comes with a higher workload. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're feeling like we can accommodate more more comfortably. But there is a recognition of shifting from input, which is, launch things and people will come, to outcomes. We're actually observing a shift in performance. We're attaching our learning and development to metrics that matter. That staff retention remains to be really critical. It's very expensive to constantly replace people. So having a management culture and a work culture that is supportive, that may well be flexible now that we have tasted that flexibility, if you like, post-pandemic. Many people will not want to return to a more sort of in the office only experience. So we need to be having a learning environment and supportive environment that accommodates both virtual and in person. There's a extra focus on connection and collaboration. At the end of the day, all organizations are collections of people. We do need to facilitate that interaction effectively because we learn off each other informally, but we can also embed that into the more formal learning models and blended learning experiences that we build. Line managers, team leads are vital really to any learning program and success. And I'd be really interested to hear your own thoughts on this, because if we don't really include them as a key audience in anything that we do, then it's highly likely that any learning program will not have the impact that we really want. So we've got to devise ways to bring them right into the experience alongside their teams. And that goes without saying, although I do have to say it, alignment with business priorities is critical. So we need to understand what those business priorities are. We need to use that language, and we need to ensure that anything that we're doing is laser focused around that. So a question's come up. Where do the 70% stats come from? Is it total research? Not total research. It's just general average, really, that's come from a range of reports that have come through. It's not going to be true for any one individual organization. Clearly, some organizations are very focused already. Others perhaps have not done that sort of transformation as yet, and so far likely to just not really understand where that investment is going, what impact it's having. But it's an ongoing area, I think, that requires further collection of data. CRPD is a good area to look at. There's also US sources as well, which are really exciting to look at. I'd call out Red Thread research over in the US, who do some really good research programs and papers. So look them up, plus also Brandon Hall over in the US too. So moving on, I think generally we need to break out of this rather bleak looking downward L&D cycle where we don't want to be caught in this anymore. We don't have a strong link to ROI. That does put pressure on L&D budgets as a result. If leadership don't see that impact, then they see it as a cost that can be cut in times where things are getting lean, rather than something to invest in to actually be part of that competitive growth strategy to sort of break out of that cycle. We don't want to be just defaulting back to compliance and regulatory. There's much more that we can be doing, and we want to be ahead of the talent market in offering an environment which is allowing for individual career growth as much as team growth, and then ultimately improved organizational performance. And we also don't want to be stuck in vendor jail, being stuck in contracts perhaps that are locking you into technology that just won't change. It's not flexible enough. I mean, that's something that we at Tota have prided ourselves on from the beginning, really, is that we are a flexible platform that allows you to change as you change. So that's really critical, and that's not as prevalent as perhaps it used to be, given the deep focus on quite sort of more limited sort of SaaS cloud solutions. Okay, moving on, what we really want to be able to do is move into what I call like a reality mode, which is with a business head on, and looking at how we can support people to perform better. And if we can do that, if we can actually build learning experiences that involve not just obvious learning activities like going on courses or consuming content, but actually activating that new knowledge and new skills in environments that are supportive, that provide immediate feedback, that you can practice deliberately, then you're going to be far more likely to be building the confidence and also the performance that we're looking to see. As a result of that, we move the perceptions and the reality from L&D being a cost center to one of being a business driver of positive change. So that's, I feel, is our real core goal. If we can achieve that, we get that seat at the table, if you like, that we often complain we don't have, but we really need to earn that by demonstrating that impact. So that immediate feedback gives us measurable results, we get rising credibility, and then ongoing we'll get return on investment metrics that will keep supporting the activities that we do. And this isn't all about sort of clamoring, if you like, for bigger budgets. It's actually more about more effective use of budget allocation. And all of this is about empowering people to do their best work. And we use this phrase a lot here at Tota, and we really try and make that our own culture here globally. But essentially, it's an inclusive statement to say, yes, there's learning activities, more targeted pieces, but this is about working with others. It's about sharing and contributing to the learning of others as well. It's a very active way to effectively, as I say, build that confidence and prove that new skill, that new piece of knowledge is being used positively and making a difference. So, question again. Big part of the challenges that I think that we have is the L&D. It probably feels like a bit of an island compared to some of the other teams as well that are in the HR space, but also across the business. And I just wanted to ask you, how siloed do you feel your organization is? What types of silos do you feel you have? And are you already trying to address this? How are you bridging that gap? It'd be great to hear some examples in the chat now.
Thank you very much, Lars. There's loads of people in the room. We've got nearly 100 people in the room. You're very quiet this morning. You're very, very quiet this morning. I'm used to having to manage dozens of queries going on in the chat, but you're all very, very quiet this morning. So let's ask you directly about silos. Do you think you're silo? I like that idea of silo. Tell us what you think. I can see a few people are typing in the box underneath the chat. We had a question from somebody, Lars. I assume if people get in touch with you at the end, they'll be able to get a copy of the slides. Somebody wanted specifically. We've got your contact details, so you'll be able to connect with Lars directly at the end if you would like to get them.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. So Michael's breaking down barriers by engaging in collaborations. Interested in collaboration, Michael. If you'd like to expand on that a little bit, difference between collaboration and cooperation. I'd like to know your thinking around that. But everybody else, where are the silos in your organisation? Who are the people you struggle to connect with? Are there separate silos? Let's have a look. We've got Steph. With a group and each subsidiary can be precious, reluctant to engage with a group offer. Have to work very hard to partner with each business and contextualize learning. That's really important, Steph. I get that absolutely. I had a similar experience in a previous organization as well. That idea of, well, what's in it for us? We're special. We need something specific to us is a really important point.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think I'll come on to this, but essentially, stakeholder management across our organizations is really an important skill to have.
Mhm.
Being able to be inclusive, but also to have the confidence, I think, to step up and challenge what might be, a set position that it hasn't been rooted in what in the experience and expertise that us as learning professionals can be offering.
Yeah.
So what Steph says is, I think, rings true across a lot of organizations. Be good to hear, Steph, if you've had any success, or any particular ways in which you've managed to, bring people together and contextualize that learning.
I'm looking at Julia and Michael's comments as well, Lars.
Mm.
Every department can work in a silo, especially with remote working. And Michael, especially difficult across remote as well. And Julia not being able to collaborate, not duplicate effort, and again, Michael being sitting around a virtual table. What are your
So,
thoughts about remote and
well,
hybrid?
remote and virtual, totally right. Yeah, I mean, essentially, when it comes to designing, I think effective learning. Um, if you think about it, learning when it is effective is a multi-stage activity. It's not a one-hit wonder. So whether you're thinking about bringing people together or virtual or at a distance, the experience needs to work in both contexts. Um, so you know, it's I think as a result of that, that learning design should be able to accommodate a fully virtual, but still bringing people together like we are today. We're together, either in more interactive forums than this, but you can also extend that interaction asynchronously. So it doesn't always have to be in a room at the same time. You can have very effective, reflective sharing and collaboration using the right types of tools. And that's something that we've been working really hard at, and I'll be coming on to sort of glue in or really cement. Well, glue is a better way, more flexibly, allow people to collaborate right the way through their learning journey, but all oriented around what they're focused on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So lots of
Just
comments here.
there's
Yeah.
some good stuff. Yeah, Gene, absolutely, Gene, that disconnect between two groups who are doing different jobs, even in the same building. I've been there and I recognise that one as well. Two silos don't work together, even when they're the same. It's a training team. Trying to bring them together is actually really important. I'm talking to an organisation recently, very similar, about how we're talking about onboarding and how the employee voice or the organisation voice, when you're talking about recruitment, has to be the same in organizational voice when the person's already started, and picking those up. Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
interesting. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Are we seeing it as our role to effect that
Mm,
sort of organizational change and culture? Yes, it can be. It's also a broader uh, sort of responsibility, isn't it, across all of the sort of leadership team,
mm,
those in charge of these various silos. And I appreciate, culture, politics, these are things that never go away really, but
yeah,
we can work more effectively across them by, if you like, engineering more collaborative experiences that people,
yeah,
are part of across these silos, because that in practice starts to break it down, whether
ab-
it's in person, well, including some in person, but also um, ongoing sort of, asynchronous
yeah.
online connection.
And the again, you're talking about, is it the role of L&D? But Ben's picked that up. New government body, L&D were the learning specialists, and didn't have the subject matter expertise, but that lack of understanding from senior leadership is, oh, you're just learning, you just make that happen, kind of thing. And is it L&D's job to weave those together?
We need to be better at communicating what's effective. We need to be able to communicate that in, if you like, business language terms. I mean, that's a very glib phrase, but we do need to, break away from our own sort of acronyms and sort of learning design language, which doesn't resonate with others. Instead, if it's about performance improvement, we talk about performance improvement all the time. We can obviously dive back into our own kit bag and design learning activities that are based on solid principles, but we need to focus on the performance improvement and describe the experience in that way.
Yeah. And Holly has picked up, just cut across this last one, working manufacturing in general, our support office-based staff and production staff are siloed. That gap between what we call knowledge workers and skill workers, just an immediate silo, because the nature of the work that people do keeps them in separate places, doing different things as well. So yeah, absolutely, Holly. I can see a couple of other people talking. I am going to close that window down again like we did before. Carry on the chat in the other chat box. I know you were very shy this morning, but see, we ask a direct question and people start coming back to us, which is great. So
Yeah.
great seeing all your comments. So I'm going to close that window back down. But please carry on the chat in the other box. Thanks, Lars.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And keep sharing stories and as I talk. I mean, it's good that everyone benefits from that. But just to summarize, we've been talking about silos. It's often separate teams, learning development, internal comms, employee satisfaction, performance management, how that process works, and then leadership initiatives that often get, sort of parachuted over the top of everything else that we do. And then management priorities and looping back to what I was saying about being more inclusive of managers, of teams, and ensuring that there is a congruency, that there's an alignment between what we're trying to do and in affecting change, and also the business as usual that often is highly protected because of the immediate goals that everyone's trying to work to. So that's a really critical piece of the puzzle to solve, because if we don't do that, the workplace experience just remains frustrating and obstructive rather than supportive. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this, where you've got competing sort of demands on your time, multiple notifications flowing through from multiple places, and there's no real personalized sort of sense of, am I being individually supported here to do the best job, the best work that I can be offering. So how do we challenge that and move, I think, towards a more unified talent experience or working experience, really, that is completely supported by timely, effective learning support as we go. So this little simple schematic here is designed as a bit of a thought experiment. So please do pipe up and add your thoughts to this as to whether you recognize this as a goal. But essentially, each of those teal dots, those that you see in the cycle here, if we could say yes to all of them, wouldn't it be good if we could, that when people come into the organization or are in the organization, that they could say, yep, I have the access to all the right resources and tools. I know how to work them all effectively to do my job, and I know where to communicate. That I'm getting timely, constructive feedback and praise where appropriate for the work. That I'm very, very clear about the goals and metrics that I am working to, and that a performance review is genuinely useful and meaningful rather than a stressful, sort of reactive, retrospective, which it often is. That yes, I have access to upskilling opportunities. There's a career path. There's a learning development program available to sort of improve competency and skills capability in the current role, and then move into other types of role. And the culture, the management culture, is one where we feel listened to. We can share honest feedback. We can challenge what we're being asked to do safely, and that if we do all of those things, then working together with your team members, you're part of a cohesive team. you're able to communicate effectively, you're going to be far more likely to be high performing in that role and in working effectively. But I wonder, is this something that you experience out there in the wild? I'm guessing it's a fairly rare animal at this point. But it'd be really good to hear of anyone's experiences in this, either success or some of the challenges that you've got. So do pop that in the chat. Dominic has popped up and said about experiential learning for all line managers. Yeah, there's some good point here from Dominic there. So take a look at that. Just moving on then. If we accept that that's our goal and our vision, our aim, then it's important that we understand the pace of change that we're operating in. And I started this talk by saying that exponential change is eating us as a learning profession, but it's eating all of our activity together across the world, really. But I wanted to recommend a book to you. This is The Exponential Age by Azim Azhar. He's UK based, but has been early in AI, actually, interestingly. But he doesn't just talk about technology. Obviously, technology is one of the key drivers of change, but it's the effect that this is having on society, on our politics, on our organizations, structures, and how we're operating. So I'd really encourage that as a read to give you a framework in which your senior leadership, frankly, are grappling with these strategic decisions, and it will give you some language and some structure to sort of find common ground at pace, because this pace is not slowing down. It's only going to get faster by definition. And I will touch again on the impact of AI briefly here, because of the impact and speed at which job roles will be shifting and changing. And some of you shared that as an issue or a challenge that you're grappling with. This is something that's moving at extreme pace. Obviously, the whole Gen AI is now front and center, and I'm sure some of you, or if not most of you, or ideally most of you, if not all of you, are experimenting with this right now. And going beyond just the immediate aspect of accelerating the production of content, helping you to think more creatively, dip into knowledge sets and skill sets that are tangential to what you have, being able to understand other people's jobs and roles. There's some really valuable ways in which you can tap into some of these general tools, but actually then looking more inside your organization as to how you can support this more specifically. But yeah, the impact is going to be significant. I have talked about the half-life of job roles shrinking. When I started talking about this 3-4 years ago, in fact, obviously things have now come to pass, and that job roles that didn't exist, say for example like an influencer, that became a job maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if you're at the front end of it. But we've now got fully virtual influencers. They've been around in South Korea for a good number of years, but now it's mainstream. It's very easy to do that. Respected trainers and subject matter experts inside your organizations. You can have digital twins. You can do that. We can do that now if you've got the right corpus of knowledge captured, and that's strictly speaking, that's now the core skill: is how do you have an accurate, trusted corpus of knowledge by which you can drive these tools. Because if you can do that, then you can really share knowledge and expertise at scale across an organization and really distribute that more effectively. So there's a lot of activity there, real-time translation, other aspects here. I won't dwell on that further because I'm sure you've all heard other speakers talk about this for a good 12 months or so, and you'll hear more, no doubt, in April. And if you're all attending the Learning Technology Show, which I hope you will be, Totra will be there come and join us at the Totra Cafe for a coffee. And tell me, here's another question. With all of this in mind, rapid change, as an organization, with the typical organizational structure at scale, often gets brittle as we sort of build out our processes and work structures, and standard operating procedures. We're demanding sort of very much a focus on repeated efficiency. But in a world which keeps changing all the time, that becomes a real challenge, because the standard operating procedures, apply a lot less. So I'm putting forward this idea that, does an organization need to be more jazz rather than classical? So if you think about an organization traditionally as an orchestra with a conductor, a leadership team conductor with a score, the standard operating procedures that they're operating with, and you need to operate in concert together for it to sound good. And if you don't really want the horn section sort of improvising halfway through a symphony. It doesn't sound right. But if the world is a bit more, much more unexpected, then improvisation really lies at the core, and that flexibility, adaptability needs to be at the heart of the way teams operate inside an organization, and ultimately that gives the organization the nimbleness, the agility to change when it needs to in response to this rapidly changing environment. So, question for you again: what do you think? Is your organization more jazz or is it more classical?
So just answering the normal chat for this one. And obviously I've come on camera just purely to go, is your organisation jazz? Nice. People in the UK, 20 years ago will recognise that reference. But please, just in the chat, are you jazz? Are you more freeform, or are you more classical, fixed and structured? Interesting as to, my organisation's rock, because, we're just loud
Yeah,
and brash. But just in the general chat,
prog rock maybe. Prog
prog
rock.
rock. Oh, don't get me on.
No,
Don't get
and
me on
this
the
is,
band tool, because that's it. I'm
yeah,
in a different
indeed.
place there. But there we go. Yeah.
And again, it's a thought experiment really to think about introducing flexibility in a manageable way into organizations, because obviously you can't have complete chaos necessarily. To meet to do this, you obviously do need structure, and but that structure needs to be iterated at a faster rate, and we can use these AI tools to help us with
Mm.
that, and sort of cycle around that change in a manageable way.
Interesting to look at a couple of the comments. I love this from Steph. Senior leaders, directors are classical, while there's an appetite for jazz further down the middle and new management. I love that, Steph. I think that's really cool.
That's excellent.
I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And then modern jazz, says Mark, which I think is nice. Very classical, says Andrew. Very classical. I like that we're stressing it. Michael says I'm a jazzer in a classical combo. Ari, the great Ari, we're jazz when an emergency strikes, but then reverting back to classical. It's hard, says
Okay.
Lauren, to get to leaders to move out of classical. I'm loving the comments on this. Well, it's a brilliant question, Lars, because it's just forcing people to think about this. Curious jazz. I'd like to know what curious jazz is, Holly. Is that sort of like ding, just the odd note here and there? We just try something a bit different. This is
Yeah,
that.
that's good. I mean, I think that distinction between, again, it comes back to stakeholder management and understanding their lens on the world. And it's interesting that, an organization can have senior leaders who aren't seeing um, that requirement for flexibility on the ground, and all they perhaps see is targets not being met because those targets are fixed in ways that are impossible to reach, because people aren't empowered to be adaptable. But that's a really good conversation to be engaging with internally, is how can we handle this, and look for opportunities where we'll look for where the cracks are, where are the business metrics really in pain. And it could well be that we're trying to sort of operate in a much more structured, forced way that just doesn't match the reality anymore. You can sort of see that in certain sectors, anecdotally, if you ring up your bank or ring up a customer service area, you know, there's an application of technology there that isn't necessarily aligned to the actual goal of customer service.
Yeah, absolutely. Loving the comments, everybody. I will. I didn't put the slide deck up for in terms of chat for this one, because I thought, we won't get loads of comments on this, and this is the question that you've all answered most. So there we go.
Yeah, good. It's
Well
good.
done,
And
Elliot. Well done, all.
it's a great way to start the conversation. So I'd encourage you to riff on this in your own way and back into your own organizations and start that conversation internally. Okay, so moving on, this is a very complex slide, so we'll share the slides afterwards. But really, the key message is that we want to move to a world where the organization has some fluid structure. It's a focus on skills rather than sort of rigid job profiles and competency structures if they are regarded as inflexible or brittle. And we need to be taking a more unified approach to how we support people, and that does really need us to get past these silos and to start working collectively in an HR function, but also very much reaching out into the wider business. One other bit of research that I was looking at recently has pointed towards a trend of decentralizing L&D across larger organizations, and I wonder if that's something you're experiencing in your own organization, a desire to get the learning and performance conversations closer to business units so it becomes less centralized. That actually does lead arguably strategically to a more flexible architecture for the organization. So we may see more of that coming. So if we do move to that sort of model, we will be able to access talent and place talent mobility being critical thing for us to be able to manage well. As certain activities decline, others pop up that we need, and they'll need a new mix of skills. So how do we really retain people in that way and move them into these new roles? It means that we can be less reactive and more anticipatory of change, so we can respond more efficiently and effectively, and that leads to a more positive work experience. So back to that unified talent experience cycle that I was putting forward as a goal for us to reach. If we achieve that, we do change the working culture to being much more positive, motivated environment, and as a result, it becomes much more high performing. That then leads to a reputation out in the wider world as a great place to grow and develop. And we know that increasingly, when you look at surveys, people are looking to working environments where they're getting access to development and growth. So that becomes a strategic driver for us. Just recruiting talent now, you need a healthy, well-developed learning culture. It becomes more inclusive by definition, really, or in practice. So that variety of input of all manner, both right across the business, because we're opening the business up to be contributory in this way. It means that we're going to be more innovative. We're going to come up with, we'll be tapping into the innate knowledge that is sitting there, the hidden knowledge that's sitting there, and to that earlier point about the leadership not knowing what's going on the ground. What's going on the ground needs to get up and up into the decision makers' desks or screens, so that they can really be mindful of what to invest in more effectively. So moving this forward, all of this means that we need to design our wider ecosystem and framework of support across the organization so that it does support motivation, what really motivates us at work. And Daniel Pink at Drive, his book from 13 years ago now, is still a really relevant read about mastery, purpose, and autonomy. I won't dwell on that today, but it does matter that we sew together the learning, the collaboration, the feedback. All of that needs to come together to effectively support people in their role and their work so they can do their best work. And it builds this bridge to speedy, timely skills development, both for internal people and also bringing new people in to support your business as required. So the model here of these elements coming together. We've brought that together into one platform at Totara, and we really believe that that makes a massive difference to the way in which the learning experiences that you design have impact, and will have a much more like a biased sort of alignment to business goals, because you're encouraging that conversation to happen, and the outputs are aligned more often than not, because the supporting systems are really helping you to do that. So bringing that together gives you this experience which you know, enables coaching and mentoring, alignment to the business goals, positive feedback, constructive feedback. It's an action-oriented learning experience. It's about deliberately practicing that with support so that you build the confidence and the experience that then means that, hey, you are now operating with that skill and that at the appropriate level, and delivering the benefits for yourself, for your team, and for your organization as a whole. So all of these elements are really crucial, I think, to any effective learning design, and we need to be, helping to do that. Moving forward, as I say, Totara has put all of this into one platform. So I'd love for all of you to take a closer look when you get a moment. But we believe that by bringing these elements will help strategically to encourage those cross-siloed conversations, so you'll get a more holistic solution and experience that is much more aligned to the individuals and the teams that we're actively trying to support. It personalizes that experience. It means that it's much more adaptable to change as well, because that change requirement surfaces itself in a practical way more quickly, and in a form that you can bring to decision makers to support. And yeah, in aligning those goals and outcomes, that's absolutely the central goal for us going forward. And with all of the continuing noise of learning technology, HR technology, being the silver bullet that solves all of our problems, and we're being sold that largely with a lot of the sort of AI talk going on now. It doesn't, sadly. It will certainly accelerate and help what we do, but if we don't set the structures up fundamentally in the right way, then we'll just get nowhere faster, if you see what I mean. So that's something that we need to keep very front and center in our minds. If you do come and take a closer look at Totara, we released our version 18 just before Christmas, and there's a whole range of improvements that we've been making to the way in which Totara operates and looks and feels, and improves the learning experience. But essentially, we've covered off a good range of improvements here. One in particular is a way in which content, when I say content, it's more really a sequence of activities which are that blended experience of really targeted learning experiences, both formal but very much inclusive of the informal interaction, collaboration, and feedback opportunities that you have, so that you can design a cohesive flow of support that is designed for an individual or a team or a set audience across your organization. So there's a lot of flexibility as a result here that allows you to target and report on and align around the real metrics that matter to you and your organization at the right level in the organization. And what that also leads us to is that with Totara, we've been actively and deeply thinking about what automation and what assistive improvements really mean to managing an effective learning infrastructure and building us towards a learning culture that is supportive of continuous change. And it's yeah, absolutely, all the generative AI tools and techniques are really important. AI analysis of analytics is a really important area too, to surface opportunities. We have to, apply an intelligent sort of human intelligence sort of support element to that, and using that effectively. But there's lots of other areas where we can deploy smart technology and positively, not least in sort of supporting the effective learning design and sequencing of learning activities. We can inform that design process, accelerate that. We can introduce coaching and mentoring experiences which are much more effective with technology support. Skills frameworks, managing those and keeping them up to date at the pace we need to, again, can be assisted. Behind the scenes, not the sexy stuff, if you like, but the behind the scenes administrative automation, that would save organizations huge amounts of time, improve accuracy as well as it matches the fluidity of change across that organization. Plenty more that we can support here. Obvious things like easy multilingual support, and then bringing in access to more general sort of intelligence tools. Lots of exciting things ahead for us, and in general, I think for us as a sector together. So I'll just finish up with a couple of things. I've already recommended the Exponential Age book. I think we have links for that, plus also another one which is like a practical blueprint, really, about what a new HR function should look like, and that would bridge those silos and gaps. Gary A. Bowles' book, The Next Rules of Work, is a really highly recommended read. So do take a look at that. I think the combination of those two books, plus the background read of Daniel Pink's, which is an old one, which I hope many of you have come across already. But combination of those three, I think, really gives you the sort of the deep structure in which to understand what's changing in organizations, and also in terms of technology. And I'm going to finish up here with an invitation to an event that's running on the 21st of February. It's a free event. You can sign up. There's links available. Learning with Impact. We've got a lot of people, a lot of learning professionals coming to join us on that afternoon to talk about learning with impact and sharing their own stories about how they've achieved that, which I think is rather exciting. So to use that QR code, if you can point that at the screen, hopefully that will work for you, and come and join us. It'd be a really exciting event. I think that's everything now. Andrew?
That's everything. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Lars. There was I worrying, oh, we're not getting any questions, and then we just had a load of questions coming. Right, a flurry. That's the word, a flurry. I was going to say, yeah, a wave. Yeah, a flurry of questions at the end. So thank you. If people would like to answers for those, I'm going to suggest just connect with Lars directly. You've got his LinkedIn details on the left-hand side. There's a little box, resources from today's webinar. You'll see in there's the Learning with Impact event. I'm going to go along to that one because I'm interested to see what other people are talking about as well. As much as Totora, what I want to know is what everybody else is talking about, because we learn from other people. There's a link there to Totora's version 18, and there's also a link to the Totora community. You've got Lars's contact, my contact if you're interested, and also links to the two books, so the Azim Azar book and also Gary Bowles' book as well. Awesome. I think that was a really interesting session. So thank you, Jean. Jean, absolutely, yeah, thought-provoking. It is. There was things I was thinking about beforehand. You and I, we went through these slides the other day, didn't we? Yesterday. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, there's some stuff from there. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, actually, there's more. There's loads of stuff I'm thinking about, capacity and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much indeed, Lars. Everybody seems to be saying really positive things about it. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you very much.
No worries at all. We close the session down now. Close the room in a moment. We'll be back at 12 o'clock with another session. I say 12 o'clock. It's 12 o'clock UK time. Our speaker probably isn't out of bed yet. It's where he is. It will be 6 a.m. in the morning where he's speaking from. So there we go. So thank you all. Brilliant session, Lars. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for engaging. These sessions are only as good with the conversation and chat that we get with them as well. So thank you to everybody. And we shall hopefully see you later on. And if we're not, maybe see you at that Learning with Impact event. Thank you, everybody. Take care. See you later.
Take care. Thank you very much.